We can start. It is
Yeah,
time.
it's time. So let's start our next discussion, our next topic in terms of Buddhist cultural diversity. I'm going to share screen.
Hello. I understand everybody went around and introduced themselves this morning. I had to work, so I missed most of it. I'm David Peppers. I've been coming to
Okay,
MABA for
nice to meet you,
quite a few
David.
for
David,
quite a few
yeah,
years.
yeah. So let's start our second discussion under Buddhist cultural diversity in Asia. Last in the morning, we we had a discussion of Indian Buddhism, how Buddhism emerged and how it developed, and uh, important junctures of Indian Buddhism, and until its disappearing disappearance in India. So today we are going to have 2 hours. Am I correct, Kure? Yeah. So 2 hour lecture. So then I'll try to cover, or I'll try to give a brief overview on South and Southeast Asian Buddhist cultures. Especially, it's not about Buddhist culture. It's a part of Buddhist culture. What we are going to discuss today, uh, its history. Introduction and development of South and Southeast Asian Buddhism. Because as we already discussed in our last lecture discussion, if you remember, in the 3rd century BCE, it means 2,300 years ago, Buddhism went out of India to Asian countries. And as a result, Buddhism had rooted and established in other Asian countries, though Buddhism had declined in India after 2,000 years of its origin. So, you saw this map yesterday too. I saw you guys. Then when we talk about Asian countries today, especially our focus, we are focused on South Asian, this geographical zone, South Asian countries. You see here, India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, and so on. Bangladesh also there. A few countries, but there are more than those countries, but we will be focusing only Buddhist countries because it's about Buddhism what we are talking. Then this is Asia, then Asian countries shown, and then we come to South Asian countries. And when we talk about Southeast Asian countries, it's these countries, this area. In terms of Buddhism, Myanmar, Burma, and Laos, in Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and so on. These kinds of countries we recognize as Southeast Asian Buddhist countries. Southeast Asian Buddhist countries. Then we are going to have a discussion together, both South and Southeast Asia. Actually, the first assignment is geographical shown Buddhist cultural relationship, religious relationship between South East Asian countries. What I mean, when you are done with this lecture, you will be it will be clear for you guys what I mean. From the from the 3rd century BCE, it means 2006, 300 years, 2000 approximately 2300 years ago, this religious relationship between South and Southeast Asian countries began. That is what I mean from the past. And to present, it's a brief, it's going to be a brief overview. It has something to do with political influence too, because always, as you know, religion and politics, they are interconnected. It's same in Buddhism too, in Buddhist culture too. That is why Emperor Asoka in the 3rd century BCE sent missionaries under the patronage he supported. He sent a group of missionaries to South and Southeast Asian countries. So that is how the religious relationship between South and Southeast Asian countries started and began. 3rd century BCE. Missionaries, they visited, especially
Your mic's cutting out pretty bad.
Oh.
Can we? I'm just curious. Can you stop your screen share for just a second? Yeah. Right now, it's just really quiet.
Maybe it has something to do with sharing.
No, it's still pretty bad. I don't know if it's a bandwidth issue. It sounds like hardware to me, but I'm just like shooting in the dark and experimenting.
When mine was doing that, Corey, you had me unplug it and then plug it back in.
Yeah, we already tried that earlier today.
Oh, okay.
Is it same?
Yeah. So there's times where it's just popping and crackling, and then there's times where can't hear you at all. Like it just goes quiet. But I don't think it's bandwidth related.
Cord wearing out. Maybe getting a little frayed inside.
No, I don't know. No. Yeah, you can go back and share your screen, I guess. Keep going forward and see what happens.
So, how is now?
Yeah, I can hear you right now.
So what I was talking, how the religious relationship between South and Southeast Asian countries began from the 3rd century BCE. Started Emperor Asoka.
Yeah, I can't hear you at all now.
Do
Corey, could he just use the built-in mic for on his device?
No, he has an iPad.
Oh,
They don't come with microphones.
uh-huh.
It's too bad we don't have an alternate to test. I'm guessing that's your only headset, Bante.
how is now?
Oh, that's good.
Maybe we can go on with Ore.
Okay.
Yeah. So sorry, something is wrong with maybe I'll so I think voice is good now. I'm going to go on, and then so what I was talking, the religious relationship between South and Southeast Asian countries. Then from the 3rd century BC, as I already told you guys, it began. Then in the Buddhist history, time to time, these countries between India and Southeast Asian countries, between Sri Lanka and Southeast Asian countries, they had religious relationship, especially in the 3rd century BCE, when Indian missionaries introduced Buddhism to Sri Lanka. Buddhism well established in Sri Lanka. That was a good thing. Why later on, as you know, as we discussed in our last discussion, Indian Buddhism already declined. Then Sri Lanka had played a big role in terms of Theravada Buddhism from the 3rd century BCE. Especially when Indian Buddhism declined, all other Southeast Asian countries like Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, and Cambodia, these kinds of countries, they are looking for help in terms of Buddhism, because even though Buddhism had already introduced to these geographical zone, to Southeast Asian countries, as time went on, it had declined and they needed to re-establish Theravada Buddhism. In that case, they were looking for help, but especially in the 11th century CE. By the 11th century CE, Indian Buddhism had declined. And then they focus on Sri Lanka because Theravada Buddhism was there. Then Theravada, Sri Lankan missionaries, Sri Lankan Theravada monks, they have gone to Southeast Asian countries and re-established Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism in these countries. It had happened time to time. It had happened time to time in the history. That is one thing. What I hope in this in your assignment too, but that's not all. At present too, for a long time, more than 2,000 years, this religious relationship happen because this is one kind of Buddhism. Then whenever each they should have religious relationship whenever they need help in terms of reform or any other requirements. So this is one thing, and of course there are something else like political influence and other influences too in terms of economic, but basically in this geographical zone in South Asia and Southeast Asian countries, Buddhism had Theravada Buddhism had rooted and well established because one reason, one secret is they had strong religious relationship. That's the that is a major fact in this geographical zone. In order to preserve Buddhism, they had strong religious relationship. So then this is how Buddhism spread. Next map you can see. I think please let me know if something going on with my voice, Kure. I think you are.
You sound great. I think your corded mic was just kind of had a bad wire or something in it, so you sound good now.
Yeah, you told me, you know, last time too. I remember. So anyway, this is another map which show how Buddhism spread, went out of India, how these religious relationship interconnection happened in the past. As you see here, here Buddhism emerged north east India. We discussed in our last lecture. Then from there, Buddhism went to introduced to Sri Lanka and then Southeast Asian countries. And also here we will be discussing our next in our next lecture some more factors. It went to how it went to China through Central Asian countries, Central Asia, and from China to Korea, from Korea to Japan, and then yellow color represent the geographical zone that we are talking. South and Southeast Asian countries, Theravada Buddhist countries, Buddhist culture, whatever. Then what happened? Then you see religious missionaries have had come to Sri Lanka, and then from Sri Lanka to these Southeast Asian countries, from South Asia to Southeast Asian countries. This is how this religious relationship progress. Asian countries, you see here different colors, Southeast Asian countries, and South Asia, this part, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia and East Asia, Central Asia and East Asia. These are the Southeast Asian countries, you see again. Let's talk about, basically, we are focusing on these countries: India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. Bhutan and Sri Lanka. Those are South Asian countries, South Asian countries. In these countries, as you know, Bhutan and Nepal, though they are Buddhist country, though there are Buddhist countries, they are not Theravada Buddhist countries. Actually, in Bhutan and Nepal, majorities are Buddhist, but not Theravada. Vajrayana Buddhist are there. Sri Lanka, Theravada, it's a Theravada Buddhist country. Bangladesh also, it's a Buddhism. Buddhist are minorities, and India at present Buddhist are minorities. Then under South East Asian countries, these countries, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos. These are the Buddhist countries. These are the Buddhist countries in Southeast Asian geographical zone. Now we are going to discuss how Buddhism introduced into these geographical zone. As I already explained, it happened the rest of Buddhist history, not only introduction, but reformation and so on. Early introduction in the 3rd century BCE, under the patronage of Emperor Asoka. Then it's called Mon and Asoka's missionaries to the kingdom of Mon people who rule in the past, actually, this geographical zone, Cambodia here, you see Cambodia, Laos, this area, its name was different. It's called Swarnabhumi. That's the old name. Then missionaries from India, they have they have gone to this area. You know, at present, names are different: Cambodia, Laos, and so on. That's the early arrival. That's the earliest arrival of missionaries from India in the 3rd century BCE. But according to archaeological evidence, Buddhism had developed and flourished in this geographical zone. But it was not continued. That is why it had, as time went on, it had declined, Buddhism. Then again, Cambodian people and the island Burmese Buddhists, they are looking for help from Sri Lanka, because Buddhism was not there in India when they need help. So then after 11th century CE, I saw this is just imagination, Emperor Asoka and 3rd Buddhist Council. We discussed yesterday about 3rd Buddhist Council. And Ashoka, these are the 9 missionary groups that Emperor Ashoka sent to different geographical zones. You see 9 groups. Mahinda to Sri Lanka, 1 group to Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BCE. Then other groups, Majjantika to Kashmir and Gandhar. It's in northwest India. Then Mahadeva, another group, modern Mysore, and Vanavasa. These are the geographical zone, old name, and Aparantaka and Maharashtra, Greek countries. It's in northeast India, northwest India, northwest India. Then Himalaya, Sona and Uttara. The last group, they went to Swarna Bhumi. It's called Lower Burma in Thailand. I just show you guys this area. This is the first religious relationship between or among Southeast Asian countries. Introduction of Buddhism to Southeast Asian countries from India. 9 missionaries, groups. These are the geographical zones to which missionaries arrived. You see here, many of them are in India, within India. 9 missionaries. Kashmir Gandhar, one of missionary groups went to this geographical zone from north east India to this area. Ashoka sent. Then this is another what we call Greek, this side, Western India. Himalayan hill country. It's closer to there is a famous mountain, hill country. So some other areas in India these areas: Aparantaka, Maharashtra, Vanavasa, and southern India. Another group went to this area, and Emperor Asoka's son, Venerable Mahinda, Bante Mahinda, he visited Sri Lanka. He introduced Buddhism to Sri Lanka. Then Swarnabhumi, it's in Southeast Asia, or modern Cambodia, Lower Burma, what is called Lower Burma, that area, present Lower Burma. So if you have any thing to clarify, or if you need more clarification, I'm happy to talk. Please let me know.
Hi, Bante. I do. I just want to make sure. So when you say the religious relationships amongst the countries, you don't mean so much, let's look at Cambodia and Sri Lanka and their political ties and foreign relations in present day. You mean more specifically, how did Buddhism spread to Southeast Asian countries from, I guess, a central point, or I guess starting with Ashoka's 9 missionaries, but it's more about how Buddhism just spread in general. And that's the relationship, and not so much like, I guess I was thinking like political and foreign relations present day when I read that as a topic, but you mean more in relation to when Buddhism was spreading. So
yeah, that's the main our main focus. You got it?
Okay. Yeah.
So,
thank you.
because Buddhist, we are talking about Buddhist cultural diversity. It has a lot thing to do with history, Buddhist history. So how Buddhism spread out of India, and then from the origin, that's the main part. I mean, Asoka's missionary service. Then after that, time to time, when each country needs reformations, they had religious relationship ties. Each other they help, especially in order to establish the order of monks. Sometimes, high ordination, what we call high ordination, disappeared in some countries. Buddhism disappeared in some countries, but because of the close relationship between among these countries, among Southeast Asian countries, they could preserve the originality of Theravada Buddhism for 2,300 years, through 2,300 years. That's the main, it should be your main focus. It's continue, but you can talk in brief, the present situation too. At present too, not that much, but because Buddhism had already established in these countries at present. So because of the past relationship, but in the past, it was strong, and they had strong tie. That is how they try to preserve the Theravada tradition or Theravada Buddhism. Because of this close relationship, this should be the main focus in your assignment. It doesn't mean that you can talk the other political influence or presentation. You can, of course, you can talk, you can write, But the basic thing, especially it started from the 3rd century BCE, and especially after 11th century CE. That's another important juncture, because by the 11th century CE, Indian Buddhism declined. Then Southeast Asian Buddhists focus on Sri Lanka, because the next Theravada Buddhist center was Sri Lanka. Then between Sri Lanka and Southeast Asian countries, they have close relationship throughout the Buddhist history, time to time. 11th century, then 13th century, 15th century, then until up to now. Time to time, whenever they need help in terms of religious reformation, and that's one example. They had this relationship. That should be your main focus. Last time I told you a book, if you can find, Kanailal Hasra's books. That's a good one for this topic. History of Theravada Buddhism in South East Asia.
I posted the PDF in Slack, so if anybody's looking for it.
Yeah, that's great. So any other?
Can you go back a couple of slides where you go over the introduction into Southeast Asia took places in stages?
Is this the one you are looking for?
No, a couple more. I think a couple more back. That one. Nope.
This
the
one
where you talk about the Mon people who ruled a large region. I was just trying to jot down the notes from that. I think it's the next slide forward.
Yeah, this is the area what we call Lower Burma. So in the past, it's one geographical zone, but at present there are 2 or 3 countries, at present. But in the past, it was just one geographical zone. It's called Swarna Bhumi, Golden Land, or Lower Burma.
Okay.
But yeah, missionaries went to this area. That's the first occasion. That was the first occasion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is what we were discussing. Rest of the Buddhist history, how Southeast Asian Buddhists preserve their tradition because of mutual relationship. Then from the 11th century CE to the 15th century, by that time, Buddhism had consolidated, well established in this geographical zone. Because of, especially what I want to emphasize, because of this religious tie, religious relationship. That's the main reason. Otherwise, Buddhism would have disappeared in these countries, because by the 11th century CE, Buddhism was not there in India, already declined. Then other countries, for example, countries like Indonesia, it was a Buddhist country, Southeast Asian Buddhist country in the past. But Buddhism declined already. But you know what? There are a lot of Buddhist ruins. They are like Borobudur Temple. It's a wonderful temple in Java. And even Malaysia. At present, Buddhist minorities. It's not a major, Buddhism is not a major religion in Malaysia and Indonesia, both. Then let's talk about Theravada Buddhism. That is the Buddhism which has established in this geographical zone. As we discussed in our last lecture, we recognize three major Buddhist traditions in the modern world: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana Buddhist traditions. Then among these Buddhist traditions, Theravada is the oldest Buddhist tradition. That is what we recognize in terms of Buddhism. Especially in South and Southeast Asian countries, this tradition, this kind of Buddhism is the main Buddhism, but it doesn't mean that that's the only tradition, but there are some other Buddhists in these countries like Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhists. Also they are in these countries, but majority and rooted Theravada Buddhism is the well-established and rooted Buddhism in these geographical zones from the 3rd century BCE for 2,300 years. But time to time, as I already told you, when the Mahayana tradition originated in India in the 1st century CE, as we talked last time, Mahayana missionaries, a group of monks, they have visited Sri Lanka and other Southeast Asian Buddhist countries like Burma, Thailand. They have gone to these countries too, even to Malaysia, Indonesia, because they are Southeast Asian countries. But this tradition had not established in this geographical zone because Theravada tradition had already established there, and especially in Theravada tradition, they are what's called orthodox, and they work harder in order to preserve their originality. always they try to, what was their aim was to preserve the originality of Buddhism, what the Buddha taught. That was Theravada, the determination of Theravada monks. They were conservative. They did not want to change what the Buddha taught, Buddhism, and even Vinaya rules, disciplines. They never change. From the 6th century BC, as you saw in terms of first Buddhist council, in terms of the first Buddhist council, they gathered everything, what the Buddha taught, Buddhist discourses and rules, and they classified and they entrusted to each group of monks to preserve each part of the Dhamma, each part of the Vinaya. They entrusted to monks. This is how they preserve, continue. That is why they had strong determination in order to preserve the originality of Buddhism. So even though in countries, in Southeast Asian countries like Sri Lanka and Thailand, Burma, in these countries, we find Mahayana and Vajrayana influences, which have got in the past. These traditions have come to these geographical zones, but they had not established because Theravada Buddhism had already well established in these countries. So then Theravada, let's talk about the word Theravada, its meaning. Maybe you have heard. So Theravada, it's in Pali we say Theravada. In Sanskrit language, Staviravada. It means seniors, senior monks. Actually, after Buddha's, after passing away of the Buddha, senior monks like Venerable Mahakashyapa, one of seniors monks of the Buddha, disciples, and other senior members of the Sangha, and they were the persons who tried to preserve the originality of Buddhism. Then they are recognized as Theravada. This word, the word Theravada, had been used in order to introduce these senior monks, seniors. How is my voice? Is it?
You're good.
Yeah, you sound
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I have another headphone too. I can try, but this is good. Huh? This is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can hear, or we can hear you perfect. So I think as long as you hear us and it's not not distracting to those around you.
Yeah. So when we talk about Theravada Buddhism, it has a long history. You saw this image in my last lecture too. I show it's a Buddha, one of the oldest Buddha image in Southeast Asian countries. Then this image represent the tradition, how did they practice, what did they focus. This is called The name of this image is Samadhi Buddha statue, Samadhi Buddha image in Sri Lanka. According to archaeologists, it's very old, more than 2,000 years. And it represents, express gesture of concentration, samadhi, mudra. Kind of, it was made by kind of stones. Then maybe you know about Bodhi tree. This is an important symbol in Theravada Buddhism. There are three symbols in Theravada Buddhism. They always represent the living Buddha. These are these three symbols. You are familiar with the Buddha statue, But how about Bodhi tree? So this is called Bodhi tree. It's in Anuradhapura, one of the. It's very famous in Sri Lanka as a Theravada Buddhist country. When compared with other Southeast Asian Theravada Buddhist countries, this is very famous. This object, this symbol, Bodhi tree, plant in a Bodhi tree. We can see in almost every Sri Lankan temples, it's a necessary part, a Bodhi tree, planting a tree. And it's not that much popular in other South East Asian countries, but they have. These are we call threefold chaityas. These are symbols of the Buddha, because Buddha is not he's not alive, he's not anymore, but Buddhists need symbols. Buddhists needed symbols which symbolize the Buddha or represent the Buddha. That is why they use some kinds of symbols. This is one of them. What we call under Buddhist art and architecture, we will be talking on these kinds of objects a lot in details. This is called stupa or chaitya or in Buddhist tradition. It's a mound, basically. Buddha's relics. When I talk about relics, part of the body, maybe hair, maybe tooth, or maybe skeleton, or whatever the part of the Buddha body, Buddha's body part. They deposited, enshrined in these stupas, and then it became a symbol of the Buddha, always living Buddha. It's a symbol. When Buddhists need to visit the Buddha, worship the Buddha, or Buddhists want to if Buddhists want to respect the Buddha, always they visit these kinds of objects, like stupas. Stupas are everywhere. It doesn't matter if the Theravada, Mahayana, or Vajrayana. It's everywhere, especially these two objects, Buddha statue and stupa. Buddha statue and stupa. It has a long history too. When the Buddha was alive, he recommended and he recommended to build, erect these kinds of buildings, because when arahants, some enlightened persons, when they passed away, Buddha advised monks and lay Buddhists to deposit their relics in these kinds of objects and to respect them. It's about tradition, Indian tradition and Indian culture. When a great person or respected persons die, people build a pillar or whatever building, and they respect. That's Indian tradition, and I believe it's same in many other ancient culture, like in Egypt, like pyramids. So in India, its name was stupa. Then that's the first. The important thing is it began when the Buddha was alive. This object, and then the second one is Bodhi tree. This is one of the oldest tree, one of the oldest religious tree in the world, I believe so, because this has a long history, more than 2,300 years. More than 2,300 years, this tree had planted in Anuradhapura, Sri Lanka, the first capital city in Sri Lanka. So Indian missionaries, as you know, Venerable Mahinda, the son of Asoka, and other members of the Sangha, they visited Sri Lanka. They introduced Buddhism to Sri Lanka. Then after 3 months of his Venerable Mahinda's arrival, his sister, Emperor Asoka's daughter, she was a nun. She and other bhikkhunis, they visited Sri Lanka with the plant of the Bodhi tree, under which Buddha achieved enlightenment, the main Bodhi tree in India. So this was a sapling or branch of the main Bodhi tree. It brought to Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BCE by Venerable Mahinda's sister, Sangamita Bhikkhuni, and it planted in Anuradhapura. Then from the 6th century BC, even at the time of the Buddha too, the Bodhi tree was considered as a symbol of the Buddha. So that is why it's very famous in Theravada Buddhist countries like Sri Lanka. Second kind of chaitiyas, objects. There are three fold chaitiyas or objects which represent the Buddha or symbolize the Buddha. This is the second one. In terms of Theravada rituals, almost every Theravada rituals are connected with these three religious objects: stupa, Bodhi tree, then Buddha image. It's very famous in every Buddhist tradition. The third object, then people use these kinds of images, Buddha statues, in order to worship and as an object of religious, or as an object which represents the living Buddha always. In the past, people had, Buddhists had deposited relics of the Buddha in Buddha images too, because then people believe, because Buddha's relics are there, then it's a symbol of living Buddha. That is what they believe. These are the three kinds of object that Theravada Buddhists use in order to worship, in order to meditate, or for especially for ritual purposes. When they visit the temple, first of all, they visit at first they visit the stupa, and then Bodhi tree and Buddha image. As I already told you, but Bodhi tree is not that much famous like Sri Lanka in other Southeast Asian Buddhist countries. Any questions or concern? Then I'm going to keep talking. So let's talk about the history of this tradition, Theravada. We are talking about Theravada Buddhism because when we talk about Southeast Asian Buddhism, we have to talk about Theravada tradition, because that's the kind of Buddhism which has established in this geographical zone. Then I already told you guys about the name or the meaning of the word Theravada, So according to traditional view, it means according to Theravada text, the Theravada tradition had produced chronicles and a lot of historical text, and even canonical text and some other commentaries. When we examine these texts, they have recorded their origin, the origin of Theravada tradition. According to the traditional opinion, traditional view, it started in the 6th century BCE, right after, after passing away of the Buddha. As you know, we talk about the first Buddhist council in our last lecture. That's the standpoint according to Theravada tradition. That's the occasion on which this tradition historically originated. The basic discussions, basic things, basic organization. Because senior disciples of the Buddha, they wanted to preserve, they wanted to continue Buddhism. Then 3rd century BCE, that is why they conducted the first Buddhist council. When we talk about Theravada canon, they always talk about the first Buddhist council. In this council, senior monks, senior disciples, they have collected discourses, the teachings of the Buddha, what the Buddha taught for 40 years, for a long times. And then they, as I told you last time, then they categorized, classified, and they take measures, they take decision, steps to preserve these teachings. Then next important juncture is in terms of Theravada Buddhism. You know it at this point. Then first Buddhist Council, second Buddhist Council, third Buddhist Council. We already talked on this thing. In the third Buddhist Council, what happened? As we talked last lecture, in the second Buddhist Council, Sangha, early Sangha, they broke away. But Theravada tradition, they continue. Sthaviravada, they continue. But by the 3rd century BCE, they had challenges. Actually, Theravada tradition, they had challenges. What were those challenges? There were early Sangha who were interpreting Buddhism, early Buddhism, you know, there were misinterpretations. Then there were respectable seniors like Moggali Puttatissa. His name is very famous, Moggali Puttatissa. He was the senior monks who led the third Buddhist council under the patronage of Emperor Asoka. Then what he did, what Theravada monk did in the third Buddhist council, especially, I talk a lot about the Theravada third Buddhist council in terms of expansion of Buddhism, but I did not talk about its some other aspects. Especially in this council, Theravada monks tried to reject wrong views, misinterpretations that had occurred in the third Buddhist council, because at that time, early Nikayas, there were, as you know, after the second Buddhist council, there were 18 groups, schools. They have different views. According to Theravada, but Theravada position, Theravada decision was they always try to preserve the originality of Buddhism. Then always this new interpretation, new views, they rejected. This was happened in third Buddhist council. Basically, they disrobed some monks who possess wrong views, wrong interpretation in terms of Buddhism. From the Theravada perspectives, they were wrong views or interpretation. Then they got the support from royalties like Emperor Asoka, and they dispelled some monks. According to historical sources, 60,000 monks they dispelled from the Buddhist dispensation because they hold wrong views, wrong interpretation of what the Buddha taught. That is how in the history of Theravada, Theravada monks had dedicated to preserve the originality of Buddhism in the 3rd century BC. In the 6th century BC to And after 1,000 years of Buddha's passing away, then in the 3rd century BC, after 2.5 century, they had the same opinion, and they have dedicated to preserve the tradition. What's called conservative. This tradition was conservative. So I have just put a picture, stupa, as this is from Burma, what's called at present we say Myanmar, another South East Asian Buddhist country. It's very famous stupa in these countries. A lot of things are going on center in these stupas, a lot of rituals you can see here too. Because it's always a symbol of the Buddha, living Buddha. Because Buddha's Buddhist beliefs, Buddha's relics are there here. They conduct a lot of rituals around this stupa or center in this and center in this stupa. This is called Swesigon stupa in Burma, Myanmar. So this is Burmese tradition. So pouring the water. So Buddha image, how people use in Theravada tradition, Buddha image, tiny images. It doesn't matter the image is small or big. So they have a lot of rituals center in the Buddha statue to pour in water. That's a big ceremony, big event in annual Buddhist calendar in Thailand, Burma, Myanmar, these countries. So, any questions? So, you need any clarifications? So next, in terms of your assignment 2, I talk from the origin of Buddhism to present. It happens, I think, as usual. It happened everywhere. It's same in many other religion too. In the case of Buddhism too. In the case of Theravada Buddhism too. Buddhism royal patronage, what we'll call royalties, they gave a lot of support in order to preserve or develop this tradition. It was same in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Indonesia. They did a great job in terms of political support. You see, I just saw these kinds of buildings, and everything. They Sri Lankan kings, they supported, and usually we Sri Lankan people say these kinds of kings had built these stupas. Then there is a famous Sri Lankan king, Gamini. He is the founder of this stupa, actually, as you know, ordinary people build these kinds of objects, but ultimately, eventually, king is going to be the founder of this stupa. That is how people think, and Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism got the support of royalties. Even Buddha statue, everything, Buddhist religious building, we see a lot when you go to, it's I think it's same in the past in other Buddhist country too, in Mahayana Buddhist country too, in China and Vietnam. But what I feel, because I am living in a Theravada Buddhist culture, it's strong. We in Theravada Buddhist countries, the Theravada Buddhism got strong support from royalties rather than other East Asian countries like China and Japan. In the past, in China and Japan, royalties, they have supported Buddhism, but when compared with Southeast Asian countries, here it's strong. Kings had done their best. At present too, in a country like Sri Lanka, according to Sri Lankan constitutions, government has responsibility to preserve the Theravada Buddhism. Preserve the Theravada Buddhism. It's a sentence. So it include in Sri Lankan constitutions, because it has to do with the past experiences, past tradition, preservation of tradition. Because in the past, kings, royalties, they did whatever they can in order to preserve the tradition. That is how politics and religions were strongly interconnected. We see it in Sri Lanka and even in Burma, Thailand too. That is why at present, in Sri Lankan constitution, we see it's a government responsibility to preserve the Theravada tradition, Theravada Buddhism, temples, monks, and these things. It's a unique thing in a country like Sri Lanka. Otherwise, people can't make these kinds of wonderful creations, buildings. It's all about royal patronage. So in this tradition, what I just talked about, how the relationship between state and Buddhism was conducive in order to preserve the tradition, Theravada Buddhism in Southeast Asia. It's almost same in almost every countries. It helped a lot. So then I'll be focusing another aspect. As you know, Theravada tradition, they preserve and compose three baskets, what we call Tripitaka. In Pali language, we say Tipitaka. In Pali language, we say Tipitaka. In Sanskrit, we say Tripitaka. Here you see the word Tripitaka. So this Tripitaka, the Theravada monks consider, and they have dedicated their whole life. Maybe you have heard in the past. From the 6th century BCE, it means right up after Buddha, after 3 months of Buddha's passing away, monks preserve this teaching by memory. What we call receptors. As I already explained, in the first Buddhist Council, as a result of the first Buddhist Council, each group of monks got responsibilities in order to preserve each section of the Dhamma. Then they continue it approximately for 500 years, from the 6th century BC to 1st century CE. Theravada monks, they remembered, at present it's a lot of text, but at that time everything was preserved by memory for 500 years approximately. Then in the 1st century CE in Sri Lanka, first time Theravada monks decided to write the teachings of the Buddha in ola leaves, kind of leaves, kinds of palm trees leaves. That's the first occasion in the Buddhist history. First time Buddhism wrote on leaves. Buddhism, that is how Buddhism preserved from the 1st century CE. We find Buddhist texts, teachings in the text, but before that, for 500 years, everything by memory. So, for this is the unique thing. For 500 years, they dedicated their whole life, each group of monks, in order to continue each section of Dhamma, Then finally, in the 1st century CE, they understood that it was not easy thing to remember everything by memory, because in the 1st century CE, Sri Lankan Theravada monks, they face some difficulties in terms of disasters because of bad weather. There was no rains for a long time, for 12 years, according to the history. Then they were trying to survive because there was no enough food and no arms. They were starving, and then finally they decided to write the teachings of the Buddha in ola leaves. That's a hard work. If they had, that is what the scholars say, this is the unique things in terms of Theravada tradition. If they had not written Buddhism in the 1st century CE in Sri Lanka, Buddhism would have disappeared at present. No, we do not have to talk about Buddhism. No Buddhism anymore. This is how Theravada monks Because in other Buddhist tradition, they have early texts, like in Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, they have early texts too, but they do not possess, they do not have a complete collection of texts in terms of early Buddhism. Only Theravada monks, Theravada tradition possess a complete collection of text, what we call Tripitaka, three baskets. That was a hard work, everyone appreciated it. It happened more than 2000 years ago in Sri Lanka, because Indian monks, even Sri Lankan Theravada monks, they were doing this task, but finally in the first century, they understood that it was not going to be an easy task anymore. At present, our memory, it's very poor. So when you talk about Tripitaka, there are, at present we see there are more than 50 texts. Tripitaka contain more than 55 text. And everything was in their memory. Each monks, they always memorize, recite. So then this is a unique thing when we talk about Theravada tradition. They preserve the original Buddhism, originality, original teaching of the Buddhism. They work harder. Sometimes they dedicate their, actually according to Sri Lankan sources, they were starving because there was no food because of a disaster. But they still they were trying to memorize. But finally they understood that they couldn't make any more. That is why they wrote on text. That is why at present we have original text and a complete collection of text for Buddhist studies or for Buddhist. Otherwise, we wouldn't have complete collection of text. Meditation practice. This is in Thailand. In a country like Thailand, Burma, and Sri Lanka, in this tradition has a lot of focus on developing meditation traditions. Maybe some monks are living in forest. What we call Aranyavasi in Pali, we say Aranyavasi. They reside in forest and they have dedicated their whole life for meditation. It was same in the past too. At the time of the Buddha, for example, a great disciple, Mahakashyapa, Venerable Mahakashyapa, he was in the forest for forever. When the Buddha passed away, he decided to come out from the forest and visit the Buddha's body. Then it has a long history in this tradition in terms of meditation. There are kinds of traditions. They have dedicated their whole life for meditation. Some monks are in forest living. Some monks are in cities and villages. Even though whatever the place where they live, they have a lot of focuses on meditation. But many monks, most of Theravada monks, what they are living in cities and villages. They have performing their religious activities. Sometimes they can't. They are unable to focus on meditation that much because they are very busy with day-to-day religious activities of religious lay people, lay community. Whenever lay people need their help in terms of blessing, in terms of education, they have to focus on these things. That is why majority, a lot of monks, they are living in cities and villages and focusing on religious activities, some kind of rituals. But some monks, they have dedicated their whole life for meditation, spiritual purposes. This is a part of monastic life in a country like Thailand. Maybe you have seen already. Go arms round, begging alms. That's the old tradition, Theravada practices. In countries, especially Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Laos, even Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. To Sri Lanka, this tradition is not that much popular in Sri Lanka at present, but it was a famous ritual or tradition in the past. But at present, what happened in Sri Lanka, some monks go arms round in order to collect foods, lunch. In most cases in Sri Lanka, lay people bring alms, food to temple. They provide both breakfast and lunch, both. But it depends on the monastery or monks. Some monks, they go arms round. But this tradition is still very famous in Southeast Asian countries, countries like Thailand and Burma, Laos. In the morning, when you when you go to these countries, you can see this scene. Along the roads, monks are going for alms. They are collecting foods. That is how, as you know, at the beginning in India, that is how monks survived and depend on lay community for their basic requisites, because they are not they were not earning, they were not producing technically, because they had spiritual they were focusing on spiritual achievement. That is why, depending on these achievement, they were unable to focus on these kinds of earning or cultivation or whatever production. That is why always they depended on lay community. Rest of the Buddhist history. So this tradition is still this tradition is still preserved in Theravada countries. That is what I wanted to emphasize. The early practices for more than 2,600 years. And when I give you guys a summary of the identity or uniqueness of Southeast Asian Buddhism or Theravada tradition, I'm going to summarize. I have put here three unique characteristics that I can recognize when we talk about the Theravada tradition, Theravada Buddhism. Especially when compared with the other two Buddhist traditions, Mahayana and Vajrayana. We will be talking on these two traditions in our next lecture. Sri Lankan time evening, your time morning time. Next lecture. So what are these are the three things, unique characteristics of Theravada tradition. The first one is, as I already explained to you guys, they possess a complete collection of text. When compared with other two traditions, Mahayana and Vajrayana. What we call Tripitaka in Sanskrit, in Pali we say Tipitaka, or the Pali Canon. It contains three kinds of text, as you know. It contains three kinds of text. The first kind, discourses of the Buddha, what the Buddha taught, discourses, a lot of discourses. Then the second kind, the basket of discipline, Vinaya rules. It contains Vinaya rules that the Buddha enacted for monastic communities, and even these texts contain Buddhist history of Buddhism, history of Buddhist ordination, history of the origin of Sangha, Bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni, and also Buddhist rites and rituals in terms of monastic communities. Those kinds of things contained in the basket of Vinaya, So it should be clear for you. The first part contain what the Buddha taught, Dhamma, teachings of the Buddha, discourses. The second basket contain rules, Vinaya rules of the Buddha, and something else too, as I just explained. Third part, you guys know very well on this, because you guys are just finished a class on the Abhidhamma Pitaka. It contains 7 texts, as you know, contains 7 texts, psychological things, Buddhist psychology, psychological analysis. Some say it's a later development. Anyway, this is a part of Theravada canon, Pali canon. third part. Then for 2,600 years, Theravada tradition had dedicated, and they have been working harder, especially monastic community, monks and nuns. They have dedicated their whole life in order to preserve these Tripitaka, because they are conservative. They wanted what the Buddha taught, to preserve continuation of the message of the Buddha. For that purposes, they have got royal patronage, political support. That is how they did this big immersing things for a long time. They did not want to change anything of discourses or Vinaya rules. That's one thing. And when I summary about uniqueness of Theravada tradition, the second factor is they are still using an Indian language, what is called Pali language. Buddhist believe that is the language, this is the language that Buddha used. At least it's an Indian language, Pali language. The whole monks, monastic communities in Theravada countries, it doesn't matter either Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Bangladesh, they all use Pali language in order to study Buddhism, in order to perform religious practices or chanting, ritual purposes. They use Pali language. But when compared, when we compare this with other Buddhist tradition, in a tradition like Mahayana and Vajrayana, they use their own languages. Chinese Buddhism, Chinese Buddhist monastic, they use Chinese languages, kinds of dialects. And in Vietnam, Vietnamese language. In Tibet, in Tibetan. Japan, Korea, in their own language, they use their own language. But in the case of Theravada, they still use one of Indian languages or the Pali language. That's the other unique things from the 6th century BCE to present for every religious purposes. So the last factor in terms of the uniqueness or identity of Theravada, when I summarize, continuation of the lineage of Sangha. I'm taking this point, I am directing this, this point is very important in terms of your assignment too. The continuation of continuation of the lineage of the Sangha, because the whole purpose of the religious relationship between Southeast Asian countries was continuation of the lineage of Sangha. That's one of main purposes. They wanted to preserve Tripitaka too, but in order to preserve the Tripitaka, we should have Sangha. We should have Sangha, because Sangha, monastic communities, always did this task in the past. That is why among Southeast Asian countries, they always had mutual relationship in order to continue the lineage of the Sangha. That was the main purpose. So these are the main, depending on our time. I just summarize some of uniqueness of Theravada tradition, its history, and so when we, on the other hand, South and Southeast Asian Buddhism. So if you have, it's time for questions or concern or whatever you want to know.
Bante, could you explain one more time on that continuation of the lineage of Sangha?
So continuation, you mean, as I explained, Buddhist Sangha originated in the 6th century BCE, with 5 monks, as we talked in our last discussion. And then it gradually developed in India. In India, it continued through Theravada tradition work harder in order to preserve the lineage by conducting, by taking measures like, taking steps like conducting Buddhist councils, 3 Buddhist councils. We find 3 Buddhist councils in Indian Theravada history. And then when Theravada try to continue their tradition, what I talk about, religious relationship is one thing among these countries. Why? Through religious relationship, when in the Sangha, higher ordination, what we call upasampada, that's the major thing that the Sangha need to continue. Then in some cases, in some countries, when they lost their higher ordination, it means disappearing the order of monk, then they got support from other Buddhist countries, other Theravada Buddhist countries. Then they reform. Actually, for 2,600 years, not in just one country preserve this continuation. It's a group work. It's a corporate work. Each countries, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Laos. When one country lost the continuation of the lineage of the Sangha, the other country helped in order to reform their continuation. That is how they continue this lineage. Is it clear? Is it clear? You got it?
Yeah, so you were saying when you say the lineage of the Sangha, meaning if the ordination stops, then there's none. Then other country has to come in to help to rebuild it.
Reform. Yeah.
Then what is the reason that the ordination will stop?
I did not hear clearly what you said.
You say, what are the reasons for the ordination to stop in some countries?
To stop ordination.
Yeah, you see, because
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they
yeah.
don't have
Yeah,
it, then
it's
you have to help them out.
yeah, I got. So because of lot of reasons, as we talk, Buddhism disappeared in India after 2000 years of its origin, because of lot of thing. It has to do with lot, because of religious influence like Hinduism and Islam. And even what we see, they did not get enough royal support, royal patronage too. The same thing had happened in countries like Burma and Sri Lanka too. Sometimes in Sri Lanka, did not have the continuation of the lineage of Sangha because of foreign invasions. So sometimes South Indian people, Southern Indian people invaded Sri Lanka. They were Hindus. They did not support Buddhism, and on the other hand, Sri Lanka had colonialism for a long time, for 500 years. Recently, from the 1500 CE to British, Dutch, and Portuguese, three nations. At that time, too, Buddhism suffered a lot in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka lost higher ordination, or the lineage, the continuation of the lineage of Sangha. Then they were looking for support from Burma and Thailand. That is how they reform, because in Thailand, they had continuation in Burma. When Thailand and Burma lost their continuation, they always look at Sri Lanka, looking for help Sri Lanka. This is how it's unbroken. You got it?
Yeah,
that should be that should be your main focus in your assignment too, because we are happy, we are doing Buddhist studies, we are doing meditation, we do everything because we have Buddhism. We have Buddhism, because why? The Sangha, the monastic community, they preserve this tradition for 2,600 years. That is why we are studying Buddhism, we are practicing Buddhism. Otherwise, we would not have Buddhism, because a lot of things had happened in the past. Sangha dedicated their whole lives, monastic communities. It's a good questions. Huh?
I also was wondering, you said in Sri Lanka, they put in that requirement in your constitution that it's the government's responsibility to protect the Buddhism. Who was the person to do that?
Basically, both the president and the parliament, Sri Lankan parliament, everyone is responsible finally, because that's the old tradition in Sri Lanka. That's the old tradition. Kings did this. King took it as a government responsibility to preserve. Actually, it was a great help to preserve Theravada Buddhism in the world history. Kings support, royalties support. Then with these past experiences, at present, it's a continuation of tradition or rights in Sri Lanka. The government take responsibility. There is a ministry of religious affairs in Sri Lanka. They took measures, every measures in order to preserve the Tripitaka. 1 year ago, Sri Lankan government declared the Tripitaka as World Heritage. World Heritage. Maybe you know. Tripitaka. Now, Tripitaka, the Pali Canon, is a world heritage. Sri Lankan president and Sri Lankan parliament, Sri Lankan government declared it 1 or 2 years ago.
I just like to share what I experienced when I was in Cambodia. I went to a Vipassana center in Cambodia to volunteer work in the kitchen. And there was a guy also helping. I was wondering, he looked so young. How would he have time to come in for 10 days? So he said he was working for the government. And he just got to tell his immediate supervisor that he wanted to come to Vipassana center to help. And his supervisor said, okay, you can go on your government time. And that was so surprising to me. To see how government is so supportive to this kind of activities.
Yeah, it happened in East Asian countries. You know, I want to add something. In a country like Thailand, the president or kings, they ordain temporary. You know, temporary ordination is there. Everyone has to become monks for the time being, at least. It helps a lot for them in the future when they marry, when they go to administration, when they are looking for a job, when they are govern a country. It helps a lot. Temporary ordination, maybe for a few weeks, for 3 months, not forever. Everyone is looking for, everyone is follow this tradition. So it's about social recognition. It's like a character certificate, you know. So even kings, ministers, prime ministers, everyone try to ordain for the time being for a few weeks. That's a great tradition, you know. Then they can experience how is it monastic life. Is it easy or is it difficult? Or everyone has experience on one hand. On the other hand, they have developed their spirituality for at least for a few weeks, for 3 months. You know, it's a good thing, I believe. Are there any other comments or inquiry? It seems to me that no more question or concern things. Corey, let's finish our class. Let's finish our class. Then see you evening.
Sounds good.
In Sri Lanka, evening time. Over here, over there, morning time.
Yep, time. Bright and early for us.
Yeah. So, okay. What is time over there now?
It's 10:30 p.m. for most of us.
Yeah, it's hard time. I know. Then good night, everyone, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Bante.
Good night. Thank you.